Connection is necessary now more than ever. At a time when we are being told to physically isolate from others because of COVID-19, that connection is crucial. And not only with others, but also with God, the divine that all energy originates from. And that divine energetic connection that we have with people can transcend the inability we currently have to engage in physical closeness with others. So it can certainly be used to benefit. But when unaware of the fact that there is a transfer of energy going on in every circumstance, you may be left unguarded and unknowingly take on energy that may not be ideal for you. Welcome to Health, Harmony, and Happiness with Kathy. I'm your host, Kathy Stricker. I'm a wife to a law enforcement officer and mama to 3 lively littles. I'm a business owner, yoga teacher, health coach, and wellness and life enthusiast. And what I really like doing is connecting others like you with resources that could bring you health, harmony, and happiness on your life journey. These 3 elements are a result of that inner light that flows naturally through you and brings contentment. They happen when you seek to live mindfully as your best self and tune in to following this inner guidance. May this podcast serve as a nudge to discover tools that could help you on your path towards more conscious living. Hey everyone! Before we get started today, I just want to take a moment to thank you for being here. I'm truly honored that you're choosing to listen to this podcast and allowing me to share more ways to bring wellness into your life. If you haven't taken a second to leave a rating or review for the show, it would mean so much to me if you would. Just share with others what you take away from the show so that we can continue to grow the podcast and reach more listeners just like you. And thanks in advance for doing that. And for those of you who have already left a rating or review in Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. The show notes from today's episode can be found at cairnyogawellness.com/podcast28. Head on over there to see a summary of the show and connect with any resources that we mention in this episode. If you're working from home or have kids at home right now, you're definitely in close relationship with family these days. As I'm recording this, I'm sitting in my basement trying to get away from any sort of unnecessary noise. And when you're around the same people all the time without any link to the outside world, it can take a toll on the way that you feel. You may not be receiving energy from sources that may subconsciously help you feel better, that you usually have access to. And you may not be getting rid of energy that is no longer serving you because you're unable to do the things that you usually do. So managing your energy, something that you perhaps have been completely unaware of up until this point, becomes something that you now need to really take note of. This connection with universal energy or spirit or God, as I like to refer to it, whatever you want to call it, is what makes us fully divine beings. Yet our ability to experience emotions and feelings and will makes us completely human. So how do we find a balance in these 2 elements as we work toward a more complete whole self and finding a sense of harmony during this time of chaos? Connection. During this time when we're being asked to distance ourselves, connection is what is going to help us continue to thrive. Connection with others, connection with our own whole self, and connection with God. Yet, even in the midst of not being able to perhaps physically touch or be very near others, the energy we give and receive is still being transferred, exchanged, and even felt. This relationship between being both fully human and fully divine, created by God, is what my guest Melissa Harris and I talk about today. We recorded this a while ago, but I realize that it is so fitting for the time that we are in right now. Enjoy the show. Hi, Melissa. How are you today?
Good morning. Hi, Kathy. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good. It's a beautiful day here and the sun is shining, and that just makes life so much different, doesn't it?
It does. It keeps it so you feel the warm with the cool, and it's just all perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is good. Well, I'm here with Melissa Harris, and she's a longtime friend of mine, and I'm just excited to have her on the podcast. So, Melissa, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. And we know each other through yoga, but that's not what we're really here to talk about today. We might talk a little bit about yoga, but we're going to talk about spirituality and your journey with that. So, share with listeners a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Well, I am an Iowan. I was born and raised in northern Iowa. And we moved around a little bit after college, lived in Northern California, lived in Nebraska, and then moved back here to Des Moines about 7.5 years ago. And since that time, like you said, I met you through yoga. I went through yoga teacher training and kind of delved into that. And then I also have become an ordained interfaith minister, and I'm working on a Master's of Divinity. So that means that I study all the world's religions, the faith paths, the philosophies, the thought paths. You've heard that phrase, jack of all trades, but master of none. It's kind of like that. Like I know some of each of them, but I don't study a lot of them in depth. But for me, I went into it to find, not to find a path, but to just study humanity. I was curious about, why we are the way we are as humans and how we try to find meaning and try to find God. And
It's so amazing and
yeah,
interesting, and it's such a huge, giant topic. And there is so much in how things work, and you've just been so much aware of how energy works and how we receive and give energy and how powerful it is. And has this program then kind of helped you with that and helped you steer and guide your thoughts on that?
it has. It definitely has. For the first couple of years or first year or two, I suppose, that I was in the program, it was so much in my head. It was so much learning about thought processes and so much thinking and like memorizing and understanding. But then I got to the place where I was really more interested in, and it seemed like a natural progression to get to how you live this. So what that means and how, you know, how we exchange and interchange and interact with the world around us and the people around us and the beings around us and all of nature. And so that to me, yeah, it's all about how we process and receive and transmit energy.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's so cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and we were talking earlier about how energy does just move from one being to another. And it's almost like it's the concept of we're all one, and we're
Absolutely.
individual, but we're all one, and anything that we do impacts not only people around us but the world around us too. And so making conscious decisions is a big part of this. How do you go about helping someone understand that energetic exchange that maybe has doubts about it, or that maybe thinks like, oh, that energy stuff is just crazy, hokey pokey, woo woo stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. How do I don't really try to make anyone understand anything but I just kind of talk about my experience. Um, because the thing is, I kind of believe it's happening whether you believe it's happening or not. And so we can't be unconnected in the world.
Right.
So we tend to think of like our own emotions and our own thoughts and our own feelings as kind of my separate personality. Melissa self is experiencing this, but you can discount that you're affected by other people around you, but that doesn't mean it's not still happening. So so
Yeah.
you can notice what changes in you in different experiences. So for me, for instance, being outside is one of them. It transforms me to be outside. When I go for a walk and I'm in the trees or I'm on the ground or I'm in the water, I feel different 40 minutes later or 15 minutes later than I did before I walked outside. And to me, it's really clear that that's a shift because of what I'm interacting with. So because of the energy that's out there in the world. And the same thing happens with people. You can walk into a room and be near a person, and 15 minutes later, you feel differently, better or worse or something. And
Yeah.
so I think to me, those examples are, it's not something you can really teach. It's an experiential thing.
Right. And it's about educating someone on the awareness of it. Because most
Exactly.
of the time it's that someone may not be aware that all of this energy exchange is happening, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
So it's the education and the teaching that can just start to draw someone into the realization that that energetic exchange happens.
Happens. Yeah. And yeah, paying attention. That's, kind of all about that.
Have you heard of forest bathing?
I have. Yes.
Okay, what do
Yes.
you know about it?
I know very little about it as far as like reading or studying it. I've read just a little bit, but I think that I do it
I
almost
think that's what
all
it
the time.
sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like you're
Yeah.
doing. My mom recently sent me uh, the name of this woman in this book called Forest Bathing, and it's written by a woman from Webster City.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know it
Oh,
either.
how
She's a
cool is that?
doctor, and my mom said, I think you need this person on the podcast. So,
Definitely.
yeah, I'm going to go that route and see if I can connect. But it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
It feels like it. It's cleansing
Yeah,
for sure.
cool. Yeah, I definitely feel more connected when I can spend time earthing or on the ground, being outside, being in nature. And that's just how my family is too. Lulu, well, all of my kids naturally have just felt calmer when they start to get worked up or anxious. And from the time that they were babies, if we would take them outside, instantly they would calm down and they would feel that. So being in nature has just been something that my husband and I fortunately have passed on to our children,
Right.
even before they're consciously aware of it.
Yeah.
So it does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the topic of your thesis, which is how we learn to live where humanity meets divinity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
And live in balance with that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So, well, I, g- I got the idea when I was reading a book, and I'll talk about this briefly, but the topic in the book was the Jesus paradox. And in that, there's some early Christian mystics who look at Jesus as both fully human and fully divine. And Christianity and its different divisions have changed the way we look at Jesus, and some kind of separated him one way and some kind of another. But this particular group, the Alexandrian mystics, looked at him as fully both, and not like a blend of both, but wholly and completely both. So the paradox is, how can you be both?
Yeah.
And as I was reading it, I just had this thought like, well, so are we. Like, this is what we are as humans. This is what Jesus, in that particular teaching, came to show us, that we are fully human and we're fully divine. And how, we talk about wholeness a lot in a lot of spiritual communities. How do you live fully and wholly? How do you become whole unless you're being both? So for me, the idea and the premise of my thesis is that we don't want to get caught up in our humanity and our emotions and our reactions and our thoughts and our feelings. And we don't want to do what a lot of spiritual teachings do, and that's transcend humanity and just be this zened out, blissful person who's not attached to anything in the world. But we want to be both,
Yeah.
because we're human and we're divine. And
And we want to have
the basis.
those human experiences. We want to experience love and fear and anger and happiness and sorrow and
Yeah,
every single emotion that you can come across. That's who we
exactly.
are. So
Yeah.
embracing that, but also knowing that we're these higher beings that have ability beyond sometimes what we can even fathom.
Yeah. I think a lot of times beyond what we can even fathom. It's
Yeah.
that thing where all these teachings try to tell us what God is, which is like so hilarious. because it's not describable. Whatever you think of it, if you think of it as a source or the universe or any type of thing,
Yeah.
you can't put it in words. But we've tried, and we keep trying, and I love trying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that piece of us that we can't fully comprehend
And it's all
alongside
within us, right?
all of it. Yeah, we are it.
That's
Yeah.
what that's what it is. So how do you live in balance with that? And how do you go further into what your thesis talks about with this?
So I've been thinking about that for a long time because I kept trying to take my thesis in certain directions that were, something you could do something with. And it kept feeling kind of inorganic to me.
Yeah.
But when you asked me that question, we were talking earlier, like, how do we do that? And I think that, well, the quick, easy answer is practice, practice, practice. I think that we each have to find the way we feel the most connected, the way we feel fully human and fully sacred or holy, and then keep practicing that. But I think a more complete answer is really, it's how we encompass all of our practice and our awareness and our surrender. So this way that, I might have a daily practice, for instance, of meditation or of yoga or Tai Chi or some body movement or of getting outside or prayer or journaling. And I do that in chunks of time. But I also want to be aware of that and practice that all the time. So even if I'm doing something and I can't stop and
Right.
write something down or stop and say a prayer, I'm in that awareness space in everything that I'm doing. So even when things are really hard and I'm in pain or I'm angry or frustrated, have that awareness that, you know what, this is it too. This is sacred too. So I want to be in this, be aware of this and surrender to it. Not that you're not going to change it. You're not going to stay angry for hours just because you became aware of it. But sometimes even just that moment of, oh yeah, I'm fully human here and I'm fully divine here. This hurts. And sometimes that even just alleviates it a little bit.
To just admit that to yourself, or to just,
Mhm.
how do you bring yourself to that point though? Like sometimes if you're so wrapped up in something, how do you let yourself stop and do that?
I think
Awareness,
that's
I
that.
guess, like
Yeah.
you have to be aware of it.
I think that's that first answer, that practice, practice, practice. Like it's that continue, it might be, I might get angry about something and stay angry for, let's say 15 minutes. I'm throwing out there an
Yeah.
arbitrary amount of time. And then I go, oh, wait a minute. I am just hammering into this anger. Slow down. Okay, what's it about? What's happening? What am I feeling? What's my body feeling? A lot of time that helps like bring me, kind of center me when I notice where I'm feeling it. And then just every time with every experience do that. And those times get a little shorter. So I might do it 14 minutes in 14 minutes in the
Sure.
next time, or, it's just that kind of constant practice. So you have your established daily practices, but then you have your kind of whole self practice all the time where it's really about, it's simplified, it's present moment.
It is.
It's in the moment being aware. So
It
when
is.
that comes up, yeah,
And
it's not
sometimes
easy to
it's,
do.
oh, absolutely not. I agree. And I like what you said. That's exactly what I was thinking about, how hopefully those times get shorter and shorter. But there's going to be times where you go back and it takes you the whole 15 minutes or
Yeah,
whatever it may be to until you realize, oh, wait a second,
I'm
I need to
done.
be here. I need to be present. Um, and like you said, there's times when it's easier than others, but I think you also don't want to get caught up in it consuming you, like these thoughts of um, I don't know, of practicing this to be all consuming and that taking all of your time, right?
Well, and I think what happens with that is we get into, I don't know for other people, but for me, if I feel consumed by it, I'm judging myself about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm punishing myself because, oh my gosh, I was in anger for this amount of time before I figured it out. Instead, then that's that surrender piece. Like, okay, so here's where I am as my human self right now. Okay, now I know. Okay, now I'm aware. And so the more we see and feel and experience that, it becomes more natural. Like, you have to be diligent about it and you have to be intentional about it, but you also have to surrender to it. And that is so simplified to
Yeah,
even say it that way. I'm hearing it and thinking, oh my gosh,
I
that sounds
know.
simplified, but it's
I
a
know.
journey.
Yeah, it really is. And I think one of the hardest things sometimes is the awareness of it.
It is.
Because there's many times that people just aren't aware that they're impacting, and I'm talking about myself too. I'm just not aware how my actions are impacting others, or how my energy is impacting others. Or I think anger is, like you were using as an example. Anger is an easy one to go to, and to use that as an example.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another example or another time where that awareness comes back to where you have to stop and step back and
Yeah.
be aware.
I have an example from this year. I think sorrow is one also,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
especially, people that are in grief. So my dad died, it'll be a year ago on Saturday. And I have noticed more this year than any time in my life how I impact people when I'm in that energy of my loss of him. And
Ah.
so there's times, I'm not a person who's really gonna hide it and pretend, but there's times I will be prepared or prepare myself when I'm going into a situation and breathe and know that I don't want to carry that energy in to affect these people or this person. And sometimes you can't help, sometimes it just is. And that's, again, I think that surrender part. Sometimes you just do. And we all have to figure out how to respond
So,
to that.
what do you do to prepare your energy then when you're going into a situation where you know you're carrying something that you don't want to transfer into others?
So I learned a practice from my spiritual director. She's a therapist and kind of helps me along my path with this master's program and with my whole spiritual growth. And it's a visualization of seeing yourself surrounded kind of like in a bubble of white light with gold mesh as the perimeter of the light. So it's like a filter. So it filters both ways. So you're not receiving energy that you don't want to receive, and you're not putting out there energy that you don't want to put out. And then in the visualization, it has mirrors that reflect outward. So those mirrors are allowing the people that the energy that they have to see it
Stay with
back or
them.
receive it or keep it. Yeah,
Yeah.
without being either of us being impacted. You can't fully not impact or be impacted by other people, but it's a way to have a filter.
Yeah. And now I just remember what I needed to tell you, and this is
Oh,
perfect. So, at the end of my practice, I decided, well, I'm going to use that visualization. And I was lying down in corpse posture, and I just tried to visualize that white light and the mesh screen or the gold screen, and mirrors. And the funny thing is, my right side, it was very easy for me to visualize, and very, like, that just went up right away. My left side, though, it was fuzzy, and it was hard, and it was darker, and I couldn't get the light to go over there. And I say this is interesting because my left side is the side that I tend to always have everything affect. I don't know why. I broke my left knee in second grade. I tore my left ACL. I've had left shoulder issues. After all of my kids, my left side is the one that gets more fatigued and is just murkier on my left shoulder, because that's the side that I most of the time hold my babies on. And that's also, if you get into kind of getting back into that mind body and what your left side represents or does within your body, that's your receiving side.
mhm.
So, like, I was really able to shield and to guard my right side, or that side that has more control kind of, or is maybe more like, I'm going to do this, but
Mhm.
the side that receives and takes in, it was really hard for me. And maybe that's why I take things on my left side, or why
Yeah.
I'm, does that make
That's
sense to you?
really
It makes sense
interesting.
to
It
you.
totally makes
Listeners,
sense.
I don't
It's
know if that makes sense to
so
you at all, but
I'm so curious about it
I
now.
know.
Yeah.
I know. So I'm
Yeah.
going to keep practicing that, because I thought, well, that is really interesting. And I had to try really hard to get that left side to show up, but it wasn't ever as clear and as present as the visualization that was appearing on my right side. And I was trying to do it just all around my whole body, but it was
Yeah.
like there was a distinct line between my right and my left.
My
So,
gosh.
for what it's
Wow.
worth,
Wow.
kind of interesting.
It's so interesting. Yeah, definitely.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's a really great practice. Um, what other practices do you do to become aware of this divine human nature that we have, or to stay connected?
So, one of them that is new to me, within the last year or so, I would say part of this is learning, part of this is experience, but um, I have really started to give myself a mindset of self love. And I know that's like a catchphrase right now, and it's really popular.
I know, but it's
Um,
so true.
it's still true. It's still true. And I didn't realize before this year like how much judgment talk I was using with myself. I thought I was motivating myself before. And so what I've
Mm-hmm.
really started to do, I was in a support group, a grief support group with a woman, and she talked about calling herself sweetheart when she talked to herself about her grief and her sorrow. And I was like, okay, that sounded kind of cheesy to me, but then I thought, you know what? How self-loving is that? And
Yeah.
so I've started to talk to myself differently when all the time, really. Like, okay, this is cool and this is curious and this is interesting. Hey, Melissa, look what you're doing right now. This is cool. Okay, how come? Why? Instead
Yeah.
of like, okay, don't do this because I used to do this. Okay, stop that right now and change to this, which never worked.
Right.
And so
Right.
really it's a lot of that. It's really made me change not just how I view myself, which it has done that, but really how I view everything around me. I've become a lot more inquisitive and curious and a lot less nitpicky and
Yeah.
judgy.
That's just what I was going to
I
say.
still
Well,
go
it's
there, but
curiosity, and you're
yeah.
nurturing that. And it reminds me a lot of the reading and studying that I've done on just how we talk to children
Hmm.
is how they talk to themselves.
Yeah.
So the things that you were saying to yourself are things that you probably heard growing up, and that's just the way it is. Like, that's just how
Yeah.
we are. It makes me sad, because I know when I'm telling my kids, oh, don't do that, or do this, or let's do this instead. And it those are the beliefs that they're creating, and the self-talk that they're creating as well.
Yeah.
But if you can reframe it and talk like you said, and picture yourself as that child almost. Sometimes it helps to do this. This is what I've learned, that if you can picture yourself as a child and giving yourself that freedom, like, oh, let's just see what happens, or it's okay. And like you said, using some of that talk, whether it's calling yourself sweetheart or using a nickname that you had as a kid, to remind yourself that, oh, I'm really just a little me inside,
Yeah.
and it's okay to be curious, and it's okay to have these feelings and these emotions. And what are they? That's another good way to remember that, right?
Yeah.
Remember
Absolutely.
your inner little Melissa, or your little
Yeah.
Kathy,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Well, and I think too, there's a reference for that as coming from a parenting standpoint for certain. But then if we also kind of look at culturally, I've been reading a lot on more of the ancient practices recently. And so you look at our culture and how outward focused we are, how focused we are on the world outside. So what that means is what our behavior looks like on the outside. And what you could use it as talk about it from a yoga perspective, what a form looks like, what a pose looks like from the outside. But everything we're doing is so outside focused because that's where you can visually see it. And we're losing this inside focus, which is kind of where that divinity begins, that sacred holiness begins. And so in ancient cultures, and a lot of them, they were focused there all the time. And so they were blending this humanity and divinity in everything that they did, and they weren't as concerned with that outward look. And so there wasn't as much judgment, I think, that we use now.
How did they do that? How did they blend those two?
I don't know that it was something, I don't know, honestly.
It's just what they did. So
it's just what they did. I think we undid it. I think like that's what's happened to us as humanity is we've undone some of those ways that we were used to be connected. Yeah. And we've undone them to the point where we're kind of forgetting that that's the natural way to be because we've put so much on this outside looking stuff.
Do you think that that's where the mindfulness buzzword and self-care buzzwords are coming from, because people are realizing this, and that's like, oh, maybe we need to get back to that and not be so disconnected?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely where they're coming from. The thing is, we have this new thought and new age movement when really none of this stuff is new.
Right.
Like I had this idea that, this whole, the Jesus paradox and where our humanity meets our divinity. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I thought of this. Well, then I think I told you earlier, then everything I read came through that lens, and it was like, none of this is new. This is all ancient practices. We're just packaging it differently and putting different words on it. But it's what we've done for centuries.
Yeah.
We're just not as well practiced at it.
Right.
Maybe now.
Right. And but isn't it cool though that you had that realization and that wow, like what they were doing centuries ago, we're still doing. Society hasn't really moved on from that, but we're just we use different words for it, and we've rephrased it, and it's and it's a little bit different in that regard.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So in your master's program and in the work that you've been doing to write your thesis and to figure out this balance between divinity and humanity and how it all ties together, are there any other key takeaways that you would like to share with listeners?
I think a key takeaway that's probably really important right now is really to remember our connection, because I think we get divided in such a multitude of different ways that we think are so important. And when the truth is that we are just constantly in connection, and we can't live in that place where, like, I, Melissa, can't live in that place where my humanity meets my divinity, and neither can you, and neither can anyone else out there, if we're separating from others. Mm-hmm. There's no way, because we are all in unity together. We're all in union, and there can't be an other out there to be separated from. So if we're, we can disagree and we can have different opinions, but if we're hating and we're pushing away other humans or beings or nature or any of that, we can't be holy ourselves. And I think that's been the biggest takeaway for me, is that every single teaching teaches that. Every single one teaches that, just in different ways.
And it's love. It's the teaching of love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It really is. And that's really cool that that's what you've gotten to experience. And by going back or by going to seminary school, that's what you're learning. And all of these religions is that love is the key thing. You knew that, but you're getting to experience it and see it. And some of the stories that you've told me about going to various religious meetings or church or whatever they happen to call it have just been really great, great eye-opening experiences that you've had.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely experiences of that connection and just seeing the different ways we learn how to do it. We all
Yeah.
learn from growing up or from
Yeah.
however
And
we got formed in that.
there's compassion and love in all of those
All of those.
religions, all of those teachings and learnings.
Of
So
course. Yeah,
very
definitely.
cool. Well, how
Yeah.
has all of this and the work that you're doing and that you're studying cultivated health, harmony, and happiness in your life?
I was thinking about that earlier. It's interesting. I think health for me, we live in these bodies and we take care of them because that makes it easier to live in these bodies. They're complicated machines, they require a lot, and they're also fascinating, miraculous machines. And so I think, I've figured out that my health is related to all of it. It's all also part of that humanity and divinity combined. My physical health is related to my energetic health and my mental health and my spiritual health. And so this study and this practice has definitely contributed to that. And harmony is really just the connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
It's really,
Absolutely. It's
that's what it is.
self-explanatory. That's what it
Yeah.
is.
The happiness for me was an interesting one to think about because a lot of my study recently and my writing recently has been about we weren't necessarily put here to simply be happy. We were put here to be whole and authentic and genuine. And sometimes that means we're sorrowful, and sometimes that means we're frustrated, and sometimes that means we're angry, and sometimes that means we're this whole other gamut of all these other things. But the truth is, if we allow ourselves, if we surrender to that and let ourselves be all of it, we are happier because we're more complete and we're more whole.
And we're
And
fully experiencing
we're
it and
full.
fully
We're fully,
experience life.
yeah, we're fully human and fully divine. So
Yeah.
I'd say that.
Very cool. Okay, well what do you do with this, or what do you plan to do with this once you get your thesis done, and what's your plan?
Oh, my plan. So let me start by saying I never did any of this. I never went into any of this to plan to do something with it. I really just wanted to immerse myself in the study. I'm curious all the time. I wanted to learn. I wanted to um, surrender into it. I wanted to
Yeah.
just be fully immersed in it. And I have been able to do that. And
And
there's a
I
part
might
of me,
say that it's probably changed your lifestyle a bit,
oh,
and it's changed your personal being, who you are. So
absolutely.
to go into it saying that you're not going to do anything was really going into it saying, you know what, though, I'm open to the self work and the changing of who I am as a person because I want to be a better person.
A better person. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to be full and complete and whole. And so right now I'm sitting on the Spiritual Council for Unity Center of Des Moines. So I do some talks there. I do some book studies there. Um, I'd likely continue to do some of that. I was speaking in Cedar Rapids for a while too. They were
Oh, yeah.
in an interim when they didn't have a main minister, so they used a lot of guest speakers. So I got to speak there, which is both of them are incredible communities. Um, as far as doing anything more, I think, first after I graduate in June, I'm going to take a little break and relax.
Absolutely. Because how long have you been working on this?
Well, in total, I'm on my fourth year. I
Yeah.
did take a little break last year when I was taking care of my dad, but since I started, it's been about 4 years. So I'm ready to, read something for fun.
Right. To write, read a novel.
Exactly. And I also, and you will appreciate this, I think, I have thoughts about turning my thesis into a book.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that will probably be in the works shortly after I finish up school.
I think
So
that's something that's probably a really good idea because you're a brilliant writer, and
you,
it would just be, you would be sharing so much with the world.
I think it
And
would
you've
be
done the work. So my goodness.
so. Yeah, and besides, I'm going to be more than halfway there by the time I'm done
Exactly.
writing this thing.
That's
So
what I mean. Like you've
yeah,
done the work,
yeah.
go for it. Melissa
So
is seriously she just is such a beautiful, brilliant, amazing writer, an amazing woman. And I'm so grateful to have her in my life, to have her as a friend. She's one of those friends that I don't get to see that often, but when I do get to see her and talk to her, oh, my heart is so full and life is so good. And I'm so blessed to be here with you today. So
I feel the same way, Kathy. That's that kind of friendship.
yes,
It turns me on. Like I
yes,
turn on energetically.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I love to see when your name comes across my phone or my email or whatever it may be. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this
Thank you.
and sit down with me and visit and share a little bit of who you are with the world.
Thank you, Kathy. It's been a true honor to be on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you as well. And I'm glad you're here. Oh, so fitting for the time we are in right now. Remember that connection is the key. When you connect first with self, you set yourself up to connect more intentionally with others, whether you are in their presence or not. So even when life may feel funny or awkward right now because it has been turned upside down, you still have the undeniable connection to self and to the divine that will ultimately help you in your connection with others. Remember that all the show notes and highlights from today's episode are at cairnyogawellness.com/podcast28. And join in the conversation in the Cultivate Health, Harmony, and Happiness community on Facebook. Thanks for leaving a rating or review in Apple Podcasts, and if you haven't done that yet, head on over there and do so. Cheers to cultivating more health, harmony, and happiness in your life. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, help us grow this podcast by sharing it with even just one other person. And it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment of your time to write a review. Your comments and feedback are what help me continue to bring you topics and guests that can help you and others on their journey in creating health, harmony, and happiness. Remember to head on over to cairnyogawellness.com to get the show notes and links from today's episode. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Cairn Yoga Wellness, and to continue connecting with more resources that could help you enhance health, harmony, and happiness in your own life, subscribe to this podcast. Thanks again for listening.